Hey, this is the World Advice Channel too. What I want to talk about today is the problem with Trump sending troops to Chicago. So I'm going to discuss today is the problem with it, and not just the problem with it, but why it's not going to work. So now I mention that, let's get started. So first and foremost, when it comes to Trump's plan to send troops to Chicago in order to, of course, reduce crime, because, of course, Chicago has a lot of crime and this and that. The truth of the matter is, the first thing I want to get across is the problem with it. Okay, the problem with it is simply the fact that it's just simply, once again, falling for the typical cliche, um, you know, sh- conservative way of thinking. I'm going to use force, in other words, to be even more specific, at the root of it, anger to make my decisions. I'm going to use anger to make my decisions, and through using anger to make my decisions, I'm just going to use something like force to try to solve a problem. Force, force, force. In other words, violence to solve my problem. Okay, I'm going to send troops there, and that is some way, somehow going to solve the problem. Okay, and the simple answer I have to give to that answer that question, the problem with it is that to actually solve a problem like that, you have to get to the root cause of the problem, okay? Now, I know a lot of people who are watching this video might say, oh, that's typical liberal shit. They always say, let's get to the root cause of the problem, blaming a system and blah, 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 and this and that, instead of actually, actually giving solutions that actually are going to do something. I know there's a lot of liberals out there who are like that, but the thing is that the truth of the matter is, even though of course it had that way of thinking has been used and abused by a lot of liberals, who've had not necessarily the greatest intentions, for that matter, okay? You know, or not even not the greatest intentions, just more just dumb. The truth of the matter is, yes, it actually is the system's fault, because the truth of the matter is, the system obviously is based highly off of money and things like that, and a lot of those places have been historically neglected and just not really well developed. And you can only do something for so long until it eventually bleeds into, or in other words, it eventually causes problems, for that matter, okay? And that's the truth of the matter, okay? That's really the root cause of the problem. Because using violence, as Trump is going to do, force, whatever you like to say, by sending troops in to, of course, arrest people in Chicago and this and that, it's like any hood, for that matter, okay? This has been going on for literally decades, okay? People always say, we need more policing, we need more policing, we need more policing. And they send the police to do these massive raids. And even though they might have some success in like getting rid of a lot of criminals off the streets and all that sort of stuff, it eventually, of course, once they leave, because of course you can't stay there for as long as possible, because of course it costs money and stuff, the problem just rises again. And then they have another massive crackdown or something. Specifically, let's just say a high profile case happened, whether it's Los Angeles, Miami, whatever, or maybe somebody got killed by a gang member or something in a very brutal fashion. Specifically, of course, let's keep it real now. Specifically, if it's a white female, they, of course, once again, of course, do another crackdown or something, and then they leave, and then the problem comes back up again. And that's exactly what I'm trying to say. And this is something that's been going on not just in America, but the world, for that matter. Using force when you live in a country where people are so poor and there's no opportunity is not going to resolve the issue. Just like Mexico, for that matter, they once had a president who tried to use force to, of course, make things better. Didn't work, let alone a bunch of other Latin American countries. Use force like violence, like better military policing, didn't work. You know, um, Philippines did the same thing with Duterte. How much better is life in the Philippines? Even if it's better now, to be fair, because Duterte did a crackdown on criminals and stuff, it's gonna come back again. And the reason why it's gonna come back again is because the root cause of the problem, which is poverty, hasn't been freaking resolved. And this is why Trump's way of thinking is so fucking stupid. And people who support his way of thinking are also falling for the same freaking trap. Okay? It's that way of thinking force is going to solve all of our problems. But you always realize force never actually solves the problems completely. And once you end it, things go back to just completely batshit madness again. And that's the truth of the matter. Force doesn't work. Okay? And now that I've talked about why it's not going to work, let me explain my second point I said I was going to discuss for the beginning of the video, which is that, to go into further detail, you know, um, for that matter, it is the simply down to the fact as well, to add to that, is that when you have this issue, okay, like poverty in the black community is caused by a lot of different things, okay? And one of the biggest things that obviously it's caused by is one of the biggest things that it's caused by is just a lot of black people don't have anything to look up to or anything to know about, like their history of Africa for that matter. So all they know is the streets. And if it's not the streets, it's segregation. If it's not segregation, it's slavery. So they have nothing to really uplift themselves and stuff like that. And that's why a lot of black people, all they know about is the hood and the ghetto. And when you talk to them, about a lot of different things, they just don't know what to say and stuff. And that's exactly what I'm trying to get across here, if anything. So that's the first point I want to get across, what caused a lot of problems in the black community, because they don't know better times. And every time black people try to talk about their own history, they get put down anyway. So that's first reason. Okay. The second reason is just simply, if you've ever been to the hood, there's not really much options for jobs. All they really have is just crappy, shitty retail jobs. Okay. If anything, for that matter. Okay. Just shitty retail jobs that I don't know why the hell, especially in a bad neighborhood, would I want to spend my fucking time working at a freaking McDonald's and dealing with unruly customers. So that's a second thing I want to get across here. There's just not enough opportunities. And the third one, I have to admit myself, is also just due to toxic ways of thinking that are created in the black community. Everything from, if you actually are getting a good education, you're trying to act white, or if it's not that, it could be, when you pick a job, especially if you have potential, it should either be music or sports. And if it's not that one, it's that whole backwards way of thinking. Because most black people, when it comes to business, the biggest reason why they don't do well is just backward belief systems, whether it could be lack of organization, lack of showing up on time, and just overcharging things for the prices for the things that they sell at their stores. Okay. And that's why we need people to speak up about that. Like, that is exactly what we should have leaders like Reverend Al Sharpton and all those people talking about, instead of just focusing on dumb stuff. And they're just, and so what I'm trying to say here is we need to have leaders who actually, you know, give advice to the youth on what to do better. They don't do that. And as a result, you see what fucking happens. Just a bunch of shit. And that's exactly what I'm trying to get across here, if anything. So, that is what is the root cause of what causing a lot of these problems in the hood, in all honesty, okay? That's what's the root cause of the problem in the hood, and why so many of these youth get caught up with the streets and all this type of shit and all that type of stuff is because of not only not really having enough opportunity, but because of toxic ways of thinking that contribute to their downfall. That's what should be focused on to resolve a problem, okay? And one thing that can solve those problems is, of course, leadership, which the black leadership in America haven't done. for that matter. So that's exactly what will actually solve the problem. So Trump sending troops in is not going to resolve anything. It might make crime go down a little bit for a period of time, to be fair, but then once it's gone, it's just going to come back up again. It's not going to do anything. It just shows you how dumb people like Trump and a lot of the people who support him actually are. It's not going to do anything, and it's just going to be the same shit um like we've seen everywhere in the world. you know let's use force, let's use anger, let's put people in crappy places where they have to worry about getting raped, like somehow rape is gonna, and threats of bad things happening in prison is going to solve the problem. Let's use force, let's use anger to make our decisions, and they do all that stuff and things still do not get resolved. And that is the truth of the matter, and what Trump is doing is no different. So anyway, this is all I have to say for my video. I hope you enjoyed it, and simply put it, I'm out. So bye.